Alright folks, welcome back. We are burning through the videos today. It's one of those, make them while you have chance, because I don't always have the availability to sit down and make a whole project's worth of videos. We're probably not going to finish this today, but we're going to get a lot more done to it. So if you watched the two optional videos, then you saw that I put a stripe down the middle of my flap panel, and I also put piping on my gusset. Now, absolutely in no shape or fashion are either of those two necessary, but they sure do make it cool, so I did it. That's why I made those two videos separately. I made them optional. Otherwise you could skip straight from the first video to this video and you're good to go. If you are interested in those two, though, I just called one of them, putting a stripe on it, and then I called the other one piping. So, easy to find. Alright, so now we've got a little bit more prep work to do before we can do some final assembly on this bag. There's a few things we need to do. So, one of them is, we're going to move these out of the way. I'm waiting on my branding iron to heat up. I'm going to put my logo right there, and since this is waterproof leather, I'm just not sure about using my normal maker stamp, so I've got my branding iron heating up to put right there. So I'm going to set that piece aside for a moment, and then we're going to, in this video, we will line that piece. I would line this flap even if it didn't have all that stripe, but that stripe creates a couple of ugly seams that I'd like to cover up, so this will look much nicer with a piece of fabric over it. People ask me about my lining fabrics. Oh, do you use cotton? Do you use this and that? Honestly, I use whatever I think is pretty and matches the project. I don't know what blend this is, if it's cotton or rayon or whatever. It's got some metallic consistencies to it, so I'm sure it's not cotton for sure. At least not 100%. So, set those pieces aside. I do have to caveat with this. I got carried away and forgot to make a video while I was actually continuing the bag. So sorry. So what I did is I measured to the center of the gusset by just folding it in half and lining up those seams right there. And I found the center, and then I went to one of either my front or back panels, it doesn't matter which one, and I marked the center of it. And I took the gusset, I lined up the center, finished side to finished side, like this, and I clipped it and put clips all the way, going around the corner and everything, all the way up both sides. And what that allowed me to do is to find out if my gusset was longer and taller than the bag side. Since it was, I cut like 1/4 of an inch off, re-skived it, then folded it over and sewed it so that hopefully these lines will line up much better when the bag is put together. Now, again, as you see, mine has the piping sewn to it. That doesn't affect what we're going to do to continue building this bag. When we sew the gusset to the main body, we're going to sew it just exactly as we would if there wasn't piping. We're going to use even the same machine, but I will change the presser foot that I'm going to use to accommodate the piping. So don't be afraid that I've done something different and you're not doing piping. No worries. Alright, so we need to prep a couple of these pieces. One of the things we're going to do is sew our D Ring hangers onto the gusset piece, and we'll also go ahead and stick a strap in there with our D-rings so that they hang nicely, and that's much more difficult since we'll use a rivet. It's much more difficult to do once they're on the bag for good. So alright, so here we have our back piece. Has our concealed carry pocket right here, and we've got this strap that's going to go across it back here, and that's where the flap is going to go under it and sew down once the bag is, that's one of the last steps of putting this bag together. Okay, so we do need to sew this line right here. We're going to sew, this part will be in the seams of the bag, and then this line right here is just going to sew down, and then again we'll sew that top line once we put the flap up under it and sew all that down. So it doesn't really matter. We can just sew it to this one piece, or we can sew the two pieces together right there. It doesn't really affect anything. It barely affects the size of this pocket, but really not enough to worry about. But I am going to go ahead and double-sided tape just that bottom part and these two sides, and then I'll sew this piece down just right across that bottom, and that's it. So I gotta find my double-sided tape is under one of these little piles. There it is. And again, the ends of this piece are skived because they'll go inside of the seam of the bag. I do want to make sure that this piece is not visible, this tape is not visible from the outside of the bag, because this is going to be a final, this won't be hidden, this will be seen. And we don't ever want to be able to see the shiny tape when the bag is completed. So I'm going to put a piece of tape there, and then I'll just go ahead and put some that I'm going to use inside the seams to help all this line up when it's time to sew the gusset onto the front and the back. So there we go. I can use glue for all this, but again, if I accidentally got glue into a spot I didn't want on the back of this, I'd be very upset about it. Plus, we'd have to wait on drying time, plus it would stink up my office. And Janie Sue's over there doing some work, and she does not appreciate the glue. And I don't blame her. So, alright, so I'm going to make sure this thing's nice and parallel by using one of my centering rulers, because they've got that grid on them. Because I can't really trust my sew line. What if it wasn't parallel? And that sew line won't be seen once the lid, the flap, is sewn inside here. So I would rather base it off of the top of the bag than the sew line. I'll go ahead and remove all three pieces of tape, or the backs of them. Get that bad boy ready to stick down. And we're not going to sew it just yet because we got some other stuff that we can prep for sewing, and then we can take it all over to the machine and sew it all at once. Saves time, saves steps, stuff like that. Now, there's not a ton of room between the top of the bag and the top of that. I don't want to cover up where I sewed around the zipper because it would just look kind of weird. It's not that I'm particularly proud of that stitch. I actually am not proud of it at all. It just would look kind of funny if that seam went up under this piece, and it's almost like, well, where did it go? So there we go. Lay that sucker down, get her nice and stuck. Again, this is the open area right here, so I can still put the bag flap in it. This is the part I'm sewing down, so this is the part that is taped down. Okay, so we got that piece in position. Now we're going to move it out of the way and move on to the next pieces that we need to get into position. This piece is the front piece, and we don't need to worry about it or the pocket yet. Those are both just kind of hanging out, waiting on their turn. All right, so we do need to sew the D Ring hangers onto the gussets. All right. There's no real rhyme or reason. I'm going to measure these, and I'll say maybe 2 inches down from the top is where I'll sew them down. Alright, but once again, I'm going to put some double-sided tape down to hold them into position whilst we get everything ready to go over there and sew. Now when I do these, there's going to be a piece of leather stuck down inside there, and it has to go in between this and the main body there. Alright, so we don't want to put our tape anywhere that's going to conflict with that. So I'm just going to put a piece here and a piece over here. That'll be it. That's all I need to hold it in position while I sew it. Okay. Another one here, because we have two. And if you wanted to add accessories to your bag, then you could easily add a couple more of these. Like on one of my backpacks that I made, I added one of these and I put just a hanging snap hook that I could attach my keys to or whatever. And I've never actually attached my keys to it, but the option's there. So if you wanted to do that, just put them further down on the side there and it'll work out great. Alright, so these two are going to get stuck, and when we stick them, we want the cutout to be up high against the, you know, up towards the top of the gusset, not pointing towards the bottom. I'll just kind of eyeball this to the center, 2 inches down from the top, and stick. Alright, now I can flip it around, do the exact same thing over here. So, measure 2 inches down, pull my paper off my tape, and put it down. Somebody over there? Alright. So, we will now put these to the side because they're ready to sew. Now, lining the lid, the flap. I hate that I keep calling it 2 different things. I'm going to try to call it the flap, but if I say the lid, that's what I'm talking about. So, to get the liner on the flap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this entire piece of fabric, which is larger than the flap itself, lay it on it, okay, and then, well, this will be taped first, okay, and then I'm going to trim it so that I can fold the edges of the flap over the edges of the fabric, because of course these naked edges will fray quite easily, and then that's where I'll sew it down and sew all the way around the thing. So what I'm going to grab is some of my wider double-sided tape, just to kind of expedite the little process here. And normally, to do something like this, I would use Super 77 spray adhesive, but that's when I can take it outside and do that, because that stuff has overspray like crazy. Like when I'm done using it, I can feel it on my arm hairs and stuff, and it's just nuts. So the Super 77 is available at I get mine at Home Depot, so, you know, any kind of hardware store and stuff like that. It's made by 3M. It's called Super 77, comes in like a maroon and black can, and it works very much like contact cement does, where you would spray it on this and spray it on the back of your fabric, wait a few minutes, stick the two together, it's going to work. Alright. So I'm going to do a little bit of taping here, get all these pieces ready to go. This is the part of the flap that will be down in the front of the bag. This is the part of the flap that's going to be hidden up under that piece that we positioned a while ago, that strap that goes across the back. So it doesn't bother me at all. This won't even, I'm not even going to fold that piece over right there. So I'm just going to run this piece of tape across the base of it. You know, and that'll give my my fabric a place to rest and get stuck. Okay. So where I'm positioning this tape, I'm positioning it right at the edge of the skive. And I'm doing it all the way around the border because I'm basically going to pull the edge of the fabric up and trim it right in that same location. And then I'll put a couple other pieces around the center and everything just so that it works out and it holds the fabric down like it ought to. Okay. So here we are across the very bottom edge of the skive here. This is the area where, you know, this will all fold up and create the corners. Now I'm just going to put a couple of random pieces in here just to hold the fabric into position for the rest of the bag's life. And it'll all be sewn taut enough that, you know, long after this tape wears, it'll still be okay, because the sewing is what's going to hold it in position. This is just holding it nice and straight for the sewing. And I figure that's probably enough stripes right there. A lot of my larger bags, I'll still do the same thing, especially when I'm teaching classes. I'll do the same kind of technique to put my liner in them, because you know, you got 15 people in a room making a bag, and that overspray is terrible. That's a lot. So, all right. So I'm gonna grab my little scratch awl here, and I'll just go ahead and peel off the backs of all these tapes using my Janie Sue method here. She's the one that showed me how to do this, since I never have any fingernails. I'm a chewer. Yar. And it usually works. Alright, so I'm going to turn this thing around, because it's easier for me to lay it going that way than it is coming toward me. I'm going to take my piece of fabric and orientate it. I've got a longer side and a shorter side. The shorter side, you know, obviously goes with the shorter side of this. And I'm going to lay it just right across the bottom of this thing. And I'm going to very gently just lay it down, making sure there's not wrinkles and stuff like that in it. If there are, that's fine. I pick it back up, I smooth them out. But you notice I didn't press anything yet. I can still pick this up and it's not stuck to the tape yet. But looks nice and straight, covers everything I need it to cover. It doesn't cover right back here at the very base, but that's okay. That's stuck inside the under that little strap on the back. So now that it's there, I'm just going to lightly smooth it from the center out. And now it's stuck. Okay, so stuck. Oh, that stinks. Scrap of double-sided tape sitting on the. I got it off. No marks. We're good. Okay, now since I laid that tape very carefully right on the edge of my skive, I can just kind of hold this back, take my skizzers here, and cut it right along the tape. It doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be straight, just cut it along the tape. Okay, you see I've got quite the jagged edge here. That's alright, because you'll never ever see it once I've sewn this. Alright, in the back area, again, I'm not concerned. That's going to be under that flap. I'm not even going to roll it over anyway, so good to go. So I'm concerned with the front and the front piece and the two sides here. And if you find it's not stuck good to the tape, then just run your hand back over it, get it good and stuck so that it's easy to pull back on and get it trimmed up against the tape. Like right here, I got it a little bit off of my line. It's a little far from the tape, so I'm going to go back and trim a little extra there. Get it good. Alright, now I need to be very careful to try to trim it right along the edge of the skive as I go around this turn, because that is a difficult place to make sure that it's all going to be covered. I could line this entire bag, but I really do not have a need to at all. It just isn't necessary. It's such a narrow but deep bag. It just doesn't matter. So, all right. Now, what I need to do is kind of train this leather and stretch it a little bit to go ahead and be ready to fold over the side of that, especially up here where the corner is. Alright, corners are really fun to do this with, and that is a truly sarcastic remark. I do not enjoy doing it on the corners here, but that's okay, we'll get past it. But yeah, just need to kind of pre-stretch that fold, get everything ready, and let it know, hey, this is coming. Alright, so now that I've done that, I'm going to take my 1/4 inch tape, the narrow tape, and I'm going to run a bead of it just right along the edge of the skive there. And this one being narrow, I can kind of go around corners with it to an extent, so getting a little off here. There we go, just like that. Now I'll peel the backing off of that piece, and we'll start folding the edges down. Okay, and I'm going to start kind of in the middle of one of the sides, and just like when we did the tops in video 1, I want to fold over a good bit of it at once. I don't want to just do a tiny bit, or else I'll end up having waves in my rolled edge, and that's not cool. There we go. Now I'm going to stop about 2.5 to 3 inches from the corner there, and I'm going to skip the corner. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the front. A little farther. We'll skip that corner too. And this is going to be a little difficult because, like I said, I've got that little tear there where I kind of got nuts with my skiver. And yeah, so we're going to require a little bit of special attention right there. I got a lot of that from my teachers when I was in school. A lot of special attention. Alright, now doing the corners. One of the best ways to do it is to take something like this, not your big old wide finger, but something like this, and kind of pull it over and down. Okay, and you're like doing one in the middle, and then you can do one over here. And what you're doing is you're kind of crinkling that leather, because when you're done, you want to see on the outside, you want to see a rounded corner. If you just use your big old finger and you pull it down and then you do it again, you won't see a corner, you'll see a squared off corner, I guess. So yeah, you'll still see a corner, but it won't be a nicely radiused, rounded corner. Yeah. Having a hard time with that fold. And then you just push them down, and I even kind of layer them on top of each other like that. And when I go through the sewing machine with it, I'll make sure that that gets nice and laid down with everything else. And it makes, again, a radius corner that I don't have, you know, an angle and then a straight line, an angle and a straight line, an angle and a straight line. I want it to look round because the bottom of the bag is going to be round and it needs to match. Now, same thing on this other side, except again, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because of that tear. And I'm going to do my Old Faithful cut way, and I'm basically going to try to push down on all sides at once. And that's kind of how I have learned to do it, and my fingers usually move the right way to do it. But you should, if you're beginning at this, you should do what I did a while ago and not what I did here. Now I'm going to look at these two corners. They look identical enough to me until I hold them up to the camera, and then this corner has a spot in it that I don't like. I'm going to kind of work that in with my fingers right there. There was one of those angles I was talking about. Now it looks better. So there we go. We are ready to do some stitching. All right. So I'm going to sew around the outside of this. Okay. It doesn't matter if I sew the back end or not. I probably just won't. So I'll just start right here, back stitch, and then go forward and go all the way around. I am going to give myself a nice margin. Look how much leather I've got under here to work with. There's no need in trying to get that stitch all the way out on the very edge, because all that'll allow is for this thing to peel back one day, and then you'll see that naked edge of fabric that you're trying to hide by doing the whole rolling thing. So it kind of defeats your purpose. You know, so I'll give it a nice wide border. As a matter of fact, on my bag that I showed earlier, I did a double stitch around this flap. And I think it looks decent, but I'm conflicted about it because nothing else on the bag is double stitched. So while it looks good, it looks nice and bold and everything, it doesn't tie into the rest of the bag to me. So I didn't bother, or I'm not gonna bother on this one. So without further ado, I'm gonna pause the video, position the camera, and we'll start stitching all these pieces together that we just discussed. Starting with this one. Alright, my iron got good and hot while I was moving the camera. It was ready to go, so I went ahead and did my little brand there, and that way I could unplug that thing and get it out of the way. So, first thing I'm going to do is check my bobbin. Got plenty of bobbin for everything I should be doing right here. I'm going to back that press or that edge guide up a good bit. Bring it back in a little bit, I guess. I only want about a 1/4 of an inch here. Alright, and again, I'm just going to start right here. I work all the way around, being really careful when I get to these areas that are folded over under here to make sure that they stay where they need to be. Alright, a little bit of back stitching. And then hammer down. I'm going to slow down as I get to my corner here, just to make sure I don't screw anything up, because that happens a lot. And my dog just sneezed. There we go. can be a problem spot to go through the thickness of the seams there, but it just walked right through them, so keep on it going. Back to hammer down. Okay, so the flap is ready. Needle out there. Looking on the underside, I did just fine catching everything, and there's no areas where it skipped. Sorry, I can't even tell if I'm on camera. All right, so yeah, looking on the underside, we're good to go. Get my scissors here. All right, so next up to bat, I will go ahead and stitch on my strap hangers. Okay, I'm not going to use an edge guide for this. I'm just going to put it in here, and I will use my presser foot, my center foot, as my edge guide, and kind of just keep it in the same position on the edge of that as I go all the way around. Being very careful when I get to these sharper corners to make sure that I do all my rotating while the needle's down. And I need to roll up the backside here to get it through the throat of the machine. This is where the edge guide kind of stinks, because it does get in the way of this one little process here. But that's alright. For all the good it does, I'll trade that one bad. There we go. Get the thing up out of the way. Alright, back to our first stitch, so I'll go right back over the first stitch and then do a couple more stitches to lock them all into place. And there we go. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and set this piece to the side, even though I've still got another one of those to sew. I'm going to do that off camera here in a minute. I want to sew up the other things that you need to see. You don't need to see me do the exact same thing more than once. Because again, you have a reverse button if you want to see it again. Alright, now this is the big flap piece, alright, or sorry, the back piece with the zipper on it. Okay, and I'm going to hold that part down. I'm just going to go ahead and stitch across that back, and I'm not going to use my edge guide because it's going to get stuck on that zipper if I try to. And yeah, I'm just going to sew that piece down. I'll start with a couple of back stitches here. And I'm just using the edge of my center foot, as usual, to be my edge guide there. I need to change my needle. I can hear it forcing its way through the leather, which means it is no longer sharp, or it's got a nick in it or something. Alright. that piece. Now again, I'm just going to pause the video and I'll go ahead and sew my other strap hanger on, and then when we come back, we'll be back at the desk. Alright, so this is the last thing we're going to do in this little portion of video here, is we still have this piece. Okay, and when we sew the bag together, it'll make it a lot easier to sew together if this isn't so loose. So we're going to put double-sided tape down all the way around this piece right here and form it as one piece. Alright, so real simple procedure. Just going to take the tape and put it almost at the very edge. Almost. And okay, so we've got the tape all the way around it there, and I'm just going to pull the paper backing off the tape, and then I will slowly make sure that those two pieces line up really nicely as I stick them together, because I won't get a second chance. Once I pull it off, I got to pull all the tape off and do it again. Alright, so there it is. So in the very next video, we're going to sew the entire body together and then add a couple of accessories such as the handle and build a Sicarian strap and stuff like that. So until then, right, there it is. Till then, I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply. This is all the videos I'm going to be able to get done today. I have to take Janie Sue to get some dinner. And that's okay, because I want dinner too. So, have a great one, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.